Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Biden signs an executive order on the digital dollar. Is this the end of crypto and the dollar as we know it? Let's explore. Indeed, what you're looking at is the actual executive order, quite a lengthy document, as you can see here. Most assuredly not written by him, but signed by him on the 9th of March 2022. So this is definitely very new, and we're going to take a look at some of the language there. We're going to look at through the eyes of CNBC as to what is in this thing and what it means for us. For those of us who, yes, some of us may have dabbled in the crypto sphere for some time, we all definitely will be affected by any changes in the dollar. This is part of the Great Reset that has been talked about and bantered about for, well, a couple of years now. But let's get into this. Here at the CNBC, U.S. President Joe Biden signed an executive order on Wednesday calling on the government to examine the risks and benefits of cryptocurrencies. It's a long-awaited directive that has had the crypto industry on edge, not least due to growing regulatory concern around the world surrounding the nascent digital asset market. There have been reports of a divide between White House officials and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, leading to delays in the policy rollout. The crypto market got wind of the executive order overnight after the Treasury accidentally put out a since-deleted statement calling it historic and releasing some of the details ahead of time. The order was finally signed on Wednesday, and it calls on federal agencies to take a unified approach to regulation and oversight of digital assets, according to the fact sheet. We'll look into it a little bit closer here and pick it apart a bit. So what is this about? Essentially, it is about protecting consumers, so they say. 6 key areas will be consumer and investor protection, financial stability, illicit activity, U.S. competitiveness on the global stage, financial inclusion, and responsible innovation. What does that mean? These are kind of, high bar things and can be interpreted many different ways, but protecting consumers is an important part of the directive. There have been countless stories of investors falling for crypto scams or losing huge sums of money through cyber attacks on exchanges or users themselves. Yes, there definitely is a lot of crypto scams out there. The Biden administration is calling on the Treasury to assess and develop policy recommendations on crypto. It also wants regulators to ensure sufficient oversight and safeguard against any systematic financial risk posed by digital assets. While policymakers have been keen to downplay any systematic risk resulting from crypto, there have been increasing concerns over the role played by stablecoins. These are digital tokens that are meant to be pegged to the value of existing currencies like the U.S. dollar. Tether, the world's largest stablecoin, with $80 billion in circulation, has attracted the ire of regulators over claims its token is not sufficiently backed by the dollars held in reserve. Doesn't that sound familiar? It's a whole derivatives market in pretty much every commodity out there. Tether says its coin is fully backed. However, the makeup of its reserves includes short-term debt obligations like commercial paper, not just cash. Who would have thunk it? Wow. The topic of stablecoins was notably absent from the White House's announcement, though Yellen has made clear she wants to see Congress introducing regulation for the sector. Well, I think they ought to do that with the commodities exchanges as well. But next is illicit activity, and this is something that I think is pretty controversial, but nonetheless, another key area of Biden's executive order focuses on its rooting out illegal activity in the crypto space. The president has called for an unprecedented focus of coordinated action from federal agencies and mitigating illicit finance and national security risk posed by cryptocurrencies. He's also urging international collaboration on the issue. Last month, U.S. officials seized $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin, their biggest seizure of cryptocurrencies ever, related to the 2016 hack of crypto exchange Bitfinex. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, authorities are now also concerned about the possible use of crypto in helping sanction Russian individuals and companies evade the restrictions. Proponents of crypto say it is highly difficult for funds to be laundered through digital currency. However, as all transactions are kept public on the unchangeable record-keeping system known as the blockchain. Yes. And then, here is another one, climate change. It's a more subtle point, but Biden has dropped a mention in the sheer energy cost baked into digital currencies like Bitcoin. He wants the government to study ways to make crypto innovation more responsible, reducing any negative climate impacts. Bitcoin relies on a mechanism known as proof of work to confirm transactions and generate new units of currency. A decentralized network of computers competes to solve complex math puzzles in order to mine the cryptocurrency. The more computing power a miner has, the higher the chances of being rewarded in new Bitcoin. By the way, I dabbled in that area briefly a couple of years ago. It was really taxing on my CPU it cost me more in energy than what I was mining. And definitely not worth it these days. That has raised alarm bells for policymakers around the world, with China even banning crypto mining completely last year. The move led to an exodus of crypto miners from the country to the U.S. and other countries such as Kazakhstan. Part of the language, the White House announcement focuses on giving U.S. a competitive edge over other countries when it comes to crypto development. This is especially significant now that China has effectively banned cryptos. Biden has tasked the Department of Commerce with establishing a framework to drive U.S. competitiveness and leadership in leveraging of digital asset technologies. Several crypto industry figures have called for such action, including the bosses at Coinbase, the world's largest exchange, Kraken and Winklevoss twins' Gemini exchange. The Blockchain Association, an organization that represents multiple well-known crypto companies, said Wednesday that Biden has the opportunity to ensure America remains the global leader for technological innovation for years to come. Well, here's the thing. I think some of the regulations that are being proposed here, and we'll look at these, some of this fact sheet anyway. The executive order is just long and voluminous, but likely it's going to probably squeeze out some of the effectiveness of the cryptocurrencies, and so overly regulate them that it won't be really worth having them. And I think they're going to do that behind the scenes so that these cryptocurrencies will essentially just fade away without them actually being, quote, banned, because of what I'm about to talk about next, and that is the digital dollar. In other words, they want their own crypto, central bank digital currency, indeed. Now, finally, the Biden administration also wants to explore a digital version of the dollar. It comes as China has led the charge towards central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, with more and more people using smartphones to make payments and handle their finances. Biden isn't saying whether the U.S. should launch its own digital currency. Rather, he's calling on the government to place urgency on research and development of a potential CBDC. And we already know that the Federal Reserve last year began work on exploring the potential issuance of the digital dollar. I covered that news after they released a long-awaited report detailing the pros and cons, with also questions that you could answer. We went over some of those questions. It didn't take a position on whether it thinks the U.S. should issue one. While CBDCs could rapidly speed up settlement of payments, policymakers are evaluating the number of issues around the financial stability and privacy. There is a watershed moment here, because delivering the new policy agenda removes a key source of uncertainty for an industry that has already been rocked by numerous regulatory hiccups and scandals. Crypto startup BlockFi was hit with a record $50 million fine by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission over allegations of violated security laws with its retail lending product. And then Coinbase has similarly run into trouble with the watchdog. And the SEC threatened Coinbase with legal action. And so I think there's going to be more and more of this stuff going to be happening, more regulation that potentially could squeeze out the crypto markets, and making room for its competitor, which will be a digital dollar, which means that all the transactions, all the blockchain will essentially be going to the Federal Reserve and through the government. Essentially, they'll have and be able to track every transaction and every roll. Now, if we take a look through this fact sheet here, there's talking about protecting U.S. consumers, and it sounds good on the surface. And when you get down here, when you look at protect U.S. and global financial stability and mitigate systemic risk, that's pretty broad. What does that mean? How would they do that? How would they protect U.S. global and financial stability in that regard? There's a lot of different things that could occur in that regard, and ways they can essentially cook the books because they'll be in control of it all. Then mitigate the illicit finance and national security risk posed by the illicit use of digital assets. And of course, that is going to be regulatory up and down and sideways. Some of the stuff in here sounds good, essentially, on the surface, and some of the language here. But keep in mind that when you have a U.S. central bank digital currency in a manner that protects Americans' interest, in order that encourages the Federal Reserve to continue its research, development, and assessment of efforts for a U.S. central bank digital currency, including the development of a plan for broader U.S. government action in support of their work. And this just goes to show you how closely they are together. It amazes me how many in this community refer to the Federal Reserve as a private bank. But for all practical purposes, it's a public entity. The government controls it. The government and the president appoints the chairman and the board. And so when you take that into account and the policies that are tied with it, they try to be, quote, independent, but they're anything but independent in my view. And I think there's some corruption there, and I think there is some problems, and especially with what they are doing with all of these repurchase agreements and quantitative easing and modern monetary theory, and all of that tied closely. I mean, look who's the Treasury Secretary now. He was a former Fed chair. It just goes to show you. But nonetheless, so it kind of goes on. The actual executive order is far-reaching here and very wordy, and talking about all of this. And some of it sounds good. They talk about privacy. They do mention a lot of stuff and democratic values and preserving this and that and other, privacy and security, the architecture, defend against illicit exploitation, which flies in the face of that privacy if they think it's necessary, and it's to the regulators what they consider to be legitimate privacy or not. Reduces negative climate impacts and environmental pollution from cryptocurrency mining, and so therefore they can just regulate the cryptocurrency like Bitcoin completely out. They can regulate it completely out of existence based off of this. And it's crazy. But so be prepared for what's to come. And it could be the end of the crypto and the dollar as we know it. But what does not change? What can they not do away with? And they can regulate the transactions regarding it, to getting it. But once you have it in your hands, they can't take it away. And there's really no way they can police private transactions either. And that is gold and silver, folks. And I think this executive order and what they want to do with the cryptocurrency and with this executive order and how they're going to further regulate Bitcoin, that's where we're heading, and we're heading towards a central bank digital currency. It's an urgent matter, it sounds like, and the reset is coming, and that means that it's incumbent upon us to protect ourselves against such things, and that is to hold gold and silver. That's the lesson here. But we're moving there. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.